This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman and Riley Smith. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Wednesday, July the 6th, 2022. We thank you for joining us. Coming up in today's show, I talk with National Pork Producers Council Chief Veterinarian Dr. Liz Wagstrom about the state of herd health here in the United States. We also have a check of your wet ag weather outlook, but first, let's run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. Well, we're coming to the end of another trading day here on this Wednesday, and we turn to Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. Jim, it's been a slippery slope so far this week. What did we see today?
Well, we actually saw a little bit of a late session buying, which was kind of nice to see. The market, after the hard break yesterday, which kind of dive back just a little bit to explain what's going on, is we continue to see the funds liquidate out of the positions of agriculture, commodities, as well as energy commodities and metals commodities. The reality is we saw a lot of money, Dustin, move into these markets on the idea to play the inflation game. The Fed's trying to do everything it can to put the brakes on the inflation, which in essence is telling the fund longs, I'm working against your net long position. The line is you don't fight the Fed, and you continue to see people liquidate for positions. And we saw some of that liquidation late last week as we wrapped up the end of the month into the quarter. I believe you saw some final late liquidation yesterday coming out of the weekend, as even some of the prominent newspapers in the financial sector were saying how maybe the inflation play had kind of run its course potentially. So we saw a hard break yesterday. We saw a dead cat bounce develop overnight that failed early in the day session, but late in the session, we did see some strength in the beans and the corn. So hopefully we're at least trying to put at least a temporary bottom in. Chart-wise, we are about as oversold as you can get.
You know, and looking at the prices, switching over to September corn and stuff, and you're seeing $5 a bushel again, which, is still better than it was a couple years ago, but it's not where we were just a year ago here. So it's definitely an interesting scenario right now.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And, the reality is it just shows us what does go up does come down. And as the old line goes up, it's an elevator, escalator up and an elevator down. And that's what we saw. Now we are optimistic we should see somewhat of a dead cat bounce. After the premium we've lost the last week, 10 days, we are oversold. The weather is far from ideal from everybody. Where I'm at in Northern Illinois, we've caught a lot of rain in the last 24, 48 hours. Several storm fronts have come through, dropped anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain. But you go to parts of central Illinois, central Indiana, southern Indiana, Missouri, southern Iowa, they have not gotten the rain. Now, the noon maps are suggesting there is some shots of rain here and there over the next couple of days. But if that rain would miss, the longer range portion of those maps, roughly day 4 through day 12, suggests not a lot of rain is going to be out there, and the heat's going to come back on, which is not good if you have not get that rain, because we're moving into that critical pollination period for the corn market.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing the difference here going from central Iowa into west central Missouri this last weekend for the holiday weekend, and corn varying depending on where you're seeing the rain. You can definitely tell who's hurting and who's hanging in there right now, and it's definitely looking like there could be some good looking crops in those who have gotten water at least. But again, you're talking about a big swath that is really fighting what Mother Nature has in store.
Well, no doubt about it. And then what we're looking at is where does this all come down to? That's total supply. That's where it matters. Now, the acreage report we got last week, reality, it was not earth-shattering. It came in right as the trade was expecting. But when you take that number, that still means roughly we need about a 174 yield to 173 to keep the ending stocks dipping below 1 billion bushels. Some of the yield models I've seen come out today are suggesting with the drop in crop ratings last night, 3 points in beans, 3 points in corn and 2 in beans, I believe it was, that national corn yield could slip closer to 174, 175. So if this crop continues to slip, we are going to have to maybe go in a little bit of rationing mode. The bean situation, Dustin's even more tight. When you look what the government did, that theoretically, would take roughly 125 to 150 million bushels off the crop by the lost acres. If you just do no adjustments, that means your carryout would come in below 200 million. Now, we don't believe they'll do that this early in the game. So we think when we get these numbers next week, the new crop carryout will be somewhere around 200, 205, 210, somewhere in that zone. But the reality is that is where we'd be at if you lower demand and keep that trend yield at 51.5, which is a record trend yield. You lose a bushel and a half out that trend yield, and all of a sudden we've got a sub 100 million carryout, which essentially is pipeline level, and the market may have to go back into a rationing mode and try to bring that price back up after this hard drop we've seen.
What about on the livestock side of things, Jim? How have cattle and hogs done here going into today?
Well, we saw a pretty good move in the hog market. The market gapped higher technically this morning. That was a good sign. So we're seeing some technical money come into the market as well as the weights coming down. So that we're seeing a little bit of drive in the hogs. Cattle market's also trying to more of a sideways chop. The demand overall, I think, is kind of a mix. I mean, the higher gas prices, as we've talked about multiple times, is definitely having an impact on some consumer demand. But on the other hand, when you go on vacation, if anywhere has been on vacation over the July 4th weekend, everyone I talked to said, campgrounds, you name it, they were jam full of people. So we continue to see some, overall people go on vacation. That tends to be good for, the overall beef demand. Now, one thing I do want to mention that we do have a big jobs number coming out here at the end of the week. It's going to be very critical to see where we're at. There's been a lot of talk of a recession, what we're going to have. There's no doubt about it. We've got some warning signs, but one thing we got to keep in mind is traditionally in the last 6-7 recessions we've had, we always have lost jobs. And right now, the latest survey suggests we still have 10 to 11 million jobs openings as currently right now. And we'll see if the jobs numbers continue to show that we're expanding it. So, I think in the big picture, we've got to be worried about our economy in the long run. But right now, it may not be as fragile as some people fear, as like I said, the jobs continue to be, we continue to see firms hire, which is hopefully a good sign for overall demand for our product.
All right, Jim, well, a lot of great information. And if folks want to talk market strategies with the folks at agmarket.net, how do they get in touch with you all?
I think the best way to do is just go to agmarket.net and sign up for our research, and also go to the website, either the Google store, or the Apple store, and download our agmarket.net app, which was there to help you market your grain.
All right, Jim. Well, thanks for the insight, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, and have a good week.
That again was Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. Let's take a look at how those markets closed, courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. September corn up 7.5 at 5.99 3/4. December up 6.5 at 5.85 even. August soybeans up 7 1/4 at 14.46 1/2. November new crop up 6 3/4 at 13.22 3/4. Soy meal up $5.20 at 4.1560 per ton. Soy oil down $1.06 at 58.56. Chicago wheat down 2.5 at 8.04 1/2. Minneapolis wheat down 3 3/4 at 8.86 1/4. Kansas wheat down 10.5 at 8.51 1/2. September oats down 1 1/4 at 4.62 1/4. October live cattle up $1.47 at 139.95. August feeders up 60 cents. That's at 173.30. Lean hogs up $1 at 113.15. Pork cutout 60 cents higher at 112.85. Class 3 milk up 31 cents at 22.41. And that's been your Ag Market Recap. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor at the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soybean Checkoff. And when we come back, I'll talk with Dr. Liz Wagstrom, Chief Veterinarian of the National Pork Producers Council. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Last month, we had the World Pork Expo here in Des Moines, and I had the chance to talk with National Pork Producers Council Chief Veterinarian Dr. Liz Wagstrom. We talked about African swine fever. We talked about PRRS and a host of other swine diseases and what the state of prevention is here in this country. Obviously, you handle a lot of the swine health and all those topics. And, the big one everybody's talking about is African swine fever. We've been talking about it for years. Where are things sitting right now as we're in 2022?
In 2022, we still have African swine fever moving across the globe. In Germany, it's gotten very close to the French border, so we may have another country going positive. Italy went positive again. And then, of course, the big one we're really watching is the Dominican Republic and Haiti, trying to make sure that we can do everything we can to keep it out of the United States since it's so close.
So, I mean, what does it take, especially now when it's knocking at our back door? I mean, how do we step up that effort to make sure it's not coming in?
There's a couple levels that we do that at. So in NPPC, we've really been advocating for more funding for Customs and Border Protection, more beagle teams, because they're probably the best defense against people bringing in meat illegally. Just really working hard to make sure they're aware and send that awareness to their front lines. And then on the farm level, we're telling producers to do everything they can to step up biosecurity, and then also sign up for the Secure Pork Supply Plan. There's a biosecurity checklist on that. Get an AgView account, which is how you could move data to the state officials if needed. And then consider looking at the U.S. Swine Health Improvement Plan. That's a monitored site status, so that if we do have an outbreak, monitored sites may be allowed to move.
So going back, let's start with the beagle teams. Obviously, you know, they're the first line of defense, but just because you have funding from people also don't realize that you're not going to get teams the next day. I mean, it takes time to build them up, and this is a danger we have now.
Right, and we have seen an increase in beagle teams. We've almost to full capacity with the beagle teams. One of the things NPPC is working on right now is there is a bill that Senator Warnock and Senator Ernst has released that would allow or give the beagles a line item in the budget. So they would be actually appropriated for the beagle training teams. Another beagle or detector dog thing that's going on is that USDA, as they are working with the Dominican Republic, has contracted to put beagle teams in the airports in the Dominican Republic to inspect every flight leaving the Dominican Republic and coming to the United States.
So when you're talking about being in an airport like that, I mean, what are these beagle teams looking for?
So they're trained on about 5 scents for sure. It's mango, citrus, dairy, pork, and beef. And then depending on the airport they're in, where the types of things that come in regularly that are illegal, they may be trained on more scents. But if you've ever watched them work, they're fabulous. They will sniff suitcases, sniff bags, and if somebody's got something they smell, they'll just sit next to that bag until the inspector comes and looks through it.
Okay. So now when we look at then tools that are available, you talked about these reports, these checklists that are available. Obviously, there's no shortage of information available for producers to be ready in case something were to happen.
There is a lot of information out there. One of the things we're trying to do as part of our national strategy is to put together a one-stop shop portal that would get you to all those different sites, that would give you all that information in one place. A lot of it will have to be state specific, because the different states have some different rules that we're also working hard to try to harmonize those. But that's hopefully by the end of the year we will have at least the beginning of that portal.
So if you can maybe take us through, let's just say, I mean, obviously you said every state's different, but let's just say we get a case that would show up somewhere in the U.S. Don't matter where, what happens in that situation? The
first thing that happens is that we will have a 72-hour stop movement nationwide. On the mainland. Mm-hmm. No pigs will be moving on the mainland for 72 hours. Those that are on the road would be able to continue on to where they were going, but no new movements. During that time, the state and federal officials will be doing their epidemiology trace outs and trace backs. So they're going to go to that farm that was found positive, look and see where the pigs come from that got to that farm, where pigs go to. Are there what they call network controls, other farms that are in that same production system that may have similar risk, and try to test those. They'll draw a control area around that farm, and then they'll start trying to visit all the pig farms within that control area, test them, make sure they're still negative, keep surveillance on those. And the goal is to keep tightening up that control area and make it smaller and smaller.
So now when we look at the U.S., obviously it's a larger country when you compare it to like Europe, where we're moving country by country. Right. So is there a situation where, let's just say, for example, southeastern United States would get hit because it's closer to the Dominican. Would it be a situation where if everything goes right, we could isolate it in just one area and prevent it from coming to, say, Iowa or even out west?
That's surely the goal, and working on that, looking at those movement, biosecurity, movement records, etc. It also would help us regionalize the United States so that with our trading partners, because we expect all trade would end, that if we can keep it in the Southeast United States, demonstrate that we are doing surveillance in the rest of the country and it's staying negative, we have the option then to try to convince our trading partners to accept product from those free areas.
So now when we look at with African swine fever, obviously there's been talk now lately, I've been hearing a few buzzes that there might be a vaccine coming. What's going on that front?
Yep, USDA Agricultural Research Service, or ARS, has been working on several vaccine candidates, and they show really great promise. They've got one that they're commercializing in conjunction with a company in Vietnam. It still has a lot of steps to go through before it would be approved in the United States, before it can be grown in big enough batches to really make a big difference, but very promising, very hopeful. If we get that vaccine, then we have to look at, do you vaccinate ahead of an outbreak? How do trading partners think of that? Or do we do like we are with our foot and mouth disease vaccine and try to build a bank so we'd have it if we need it?
And, bringing up foot and mouth disease, the thing is we've been focused so much on African swine fever, but there are still other things like foot and mouth disease to think about. And, the other laundry list of issues that pigs can be facing out there. I mean, where are things at on health fronts, around the globe, around the country here?
Yep, we clearly have health challenges. We've got PRRS that has kind of raised its head again. We've heard about APP, Actinobacillus pleuropneumonia, hitting some herds hard. It's a continual health challenge, and our producers do a great job of identifying those, getting their vets involved, making sure that they're looking at that. That's one of our messages, to try to pull that all back to being prepared for African swine fever. Some of these cases that you're seeing that may be PRRS, maybe Salmonella, maybe APP, could look like African swine fever. So we're encouraging producers to ask their veterinarian to call the state veterinarian and see if they need to do a foreign animal disease investigation.
So this pneumonia that you're talking about, what's that? It's something we don't hear about a lot.
Yeah. Back in the days when I was first in vet school, APP used to be a big deal, and a lot of that was we had poor ventilation, we had poor growing conditions, we were commingling pigs, and it can get pretty nasty. It's a really tough pneumonia. It is a bacteria, so it can be treated with antibiotics, and there's been bubbles of it or areas in north central Iowa that have been hit, but doesn't seem to be moving nationwide.
Now, is that something that can cause a lot of concern with when you're talking about the supply chain and stuff like that, or is it something we just kind of got to wait out?
I think that we can handle it. I mean, we used to have a lot of it back in the 80s and 90s, and now it's just popped up in a few areas.
And what about PRRS? Where are we seeing that pop up again?
PRRS is pretty nasty nationwide, and it cycles seasonally, and it continues to, we continue to see new variants or new types of PRRS. Some of them are pretty nasty.
And what is, for those who might be watching and not sure what PRRS does, tell us about what PRRS affects them.
So PRRS is porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome. And so it can cause abortions, stillbirths, fertility problems, and then in finishing pigs and nursery pigs, you see that those pneumonias, the thumping, and in some cases are really severe. You might see blue ears, blue undersides, and so it can range from being pretty mild, where you have PRRS positive animals that never show any signs, to being pretty deadly.
Now, you also mentioned, like with the pneumonia, it can be treated with antibiotics, and of course that's something that consumers are always wondering about. Is there antibiotics in the food? Can you kind of talk to what happens with an animal that's been treated before it goes into the food chain?
FDA, when they approve a product, an antibiotic for use in animals, also looks at the safety profile. So they will figure out how much, it's called an ADI, which is daily intake of food or meat product, look at what is the safe level that a human could consume. then multiply it for a safety factor, and then do studies to say how many days after an animal has been treated are they below that safe level. And that's called our withdrawal time. And producers are very good at following withdrawal times. If you look at the testing that's done in the packing plants, we have almost no pork violations for that residue and withdrawal times.
All right. So again, a lot of great information, a lot of things we covered here today. If folks out there, producers, want more information about what's being done, what they need to know about health for their swine herds, where do they find that?
Well, first of all, have a veterinarian.
Yep.
Secondly, we're available at nppc.org to look at the policy issues around foreign animal diseases. Some of the research issues you can go to either Swine Health Information Center or the National Pork Board, which is Pork Checkoff.
All right. Well, Dr. Wagstrom, we thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for coming to Expo.
That again was National Pork Producers Council Chief Veterinarian Dr. Liz Wagstrom here on AM/PM. Let's take a look at that ag weather outlook. Well, it started out pretty rainy here after a stormy night in Des Moines. We did see those temperatures give way, and now we're seeing temps in the upper 70s to the low 80s. But it is still plenty humid out there and feels a little sticky. But those clouds do remain, and the chances for precipitation increase again across the state. Let's see what the National Weather Service has in store for the next 24 hours. As we said before, we saw mostly cloudy skies across a good chunk of the state, but we'll still see a slight chance of thunderstorms building back up here this afternoon. We saw those highs in the low to upper 80s. Now tonight, thunderstorms will become likely overnight. The chances will get higher from west to east as the evening goes on. We'll see lows in the upper 60s to the low 70s. Tomorrow, thunderstorms will continue across the state, and we'll see highs in the 80s. Now looking at the affiliate weather map for tomorrow, as you can see, showers and thunderstorms likely across the state. Cherokee and Clinton will both check in as the low spot tomorrow at 81 degrees. Albia, Waterloo, and Des Moines also looking for showers and thunderstorms and a high of 85. Shenandoah will see showers and thunderstorms, and they'll be the hot spot in our affiliate map at 88 degrees. For more detailed forecasts in your area, tune to your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate. And just like that, we're at the end of our show. We thank you for watching. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and on our YouTube channel, where you can find back episodes of AM/PM. So make sure you follow and like and click that thumbs up button so you get notifications anytime we produce new content. You can also find our free twice daily market podcasts on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and Google. And don't forget to sign up for our e-newsletter at iowaagnet.com. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith and Avery Haskell, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.